There's a reason we picked Cressida to come as our first guest, because we knew we would not be late. She has to get to the state dinner because she has to manage the security of a president, a queen, the entire families of both. So we are going to be on time, Cressida, aren't we?
Thank you. And luckily we've done the makeup, so.
There you go.
Great.
She just literally has to head over. So here's my question for you, since the makeup is done. What is that state banquet going to look like tonight? Because I think a lot of people are wondering, how fun is that party going to be?
Well, I don't know exactly. All I know is it will be glittering. It will be on a large scale. It will be very exciting. The people at Buckingham Palace have the amazing ability to be both obviously very formal in some ways and very informal, and make the humblest and the person who may think they're the most important person in the room feel really, really special and welcome. So I'm sure it will be great fun. It'll be fascinating to hear the speeches, because I'm sure we will, get some really interesting insights into, the tone of both. But it'll be a great night. And, I'm the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. We adore protecting visiting heads of state, whoever they may be. It's extraordinary to have a state visit, and on one on this sort of scale. We've done them before, we'll do them in the future, but it's a great time for London.
How different is it going to be? Because I know you and the Met had to take a lot of heat in the last, if you were here during the Extinction Rebellion protests, there was a lot of heat that you had to take. How much preparation is different this time around for a state visit? I know you do so many of these. You've done a lot with US administrations before. And how easy is it going to be for all of us to travel tomorrow back to here?
So, we take our role really seriously. On the one hand, to keep safe the visiting head of state and their entourage and everybody connected with it, and of course our own royal family. And on the other hand, in a liberal democracy like ours, to ensure that if people wish to protest lawfully, they can do so without crime and do so safely. So we do both those things, and of course it isn't just about these 2 days. The heads of state are meeting other heads of state down in Portsmouth, and again my protection officers will be with them. We always put an enormous amount of preparation into every visiting head of state visit. And we work really closely with our counterparts, in this case from the United States. We have a really long established relationship with them, as you say. And we will be pretty firm if protesters are intending to try to protest in a way which is unlawful, and very, very firm if anybody wants to do anything which might in any way endanger the security of the visit, obviously. So we've done a lot of preparation. I'm very confident. I've got great people. I'm sure it'll go well.
Well, I know I want to come to all of you for questions in just a minute, because I'd love getting you involved in these conversations right off the top of the bat. But set the record straight. There's a lot of talk about how many officers are going to be out there protecting the president at the time of Brexit, uncertainty, budget cuts, blah, blah, blah. How many officers? What's the budget looking like? Can you set the record straight from what we're hearing?
So I'm not going to give any details, because we don't. We tend to add it all up afterwards. But all I can say is if you've read things like 10,000 officers, that's completely wrong. Miles above what we will be having. And actually this particular visit, in terms of the numbers of protests and the complexity of the protests, at least as they have been made known to us, is very much less than last year's. So I think the stretch on us, and we work really closely with other police forces on UK policing, is this year less than last time the President of the United States visited us.
Well, here's where the conversation gets interesting. I know we introduced Cressida as the first female Met Commissioner. There are lots and lots of other firsts that you keep getting labeled with. And I remember reading somewhere that when people call you the first female Met Commissioner or the first openly gay commissioner, that's probably the most boring thing about you. What is the most interesting?
Goodness. I don't think there's anything very interesting about me. I love my job. I started work on patrol, not many, hundreds of meters away from here, as a beat constable, and that's what we do. And at heart, I am a beat constable. Obviously, I'm now leading an organisation of 40,000 people with lots of national and indeed some international responsibilities. But at heart, I'm a police officer, and I've had a wonderful time doing it.
Well, let's get some questions if you have any, because we have so many questions about security. National security, terrorism, knife crime. We have our Mic handlers right there.
Hi, Alan Murray. Sorry to take the first question. I'm demographically unqualified for this. But I'm curious because in the United States, there's going to be a lot of talk about technology in the next couple of days. In the United States, we've had these voices speak up, San Francisco first, saying that facial recognition should not be used in law enforcement in the city. I'm curious what your view on that is.
Yeah. So I think that's fascinating and important. I mean, London is, for those of you who are here relatively infrequently, it's a very safe city. We need to keep it a safe city into the future. And London's wealth, I guess, depends to a large extent on being a place that, not least foreign investors want to come and be and put their money and live. And we, as we go forward, in my view, need to make the best use of modern technologies, but obviously in a way which is acceptable to the public, because we have to balance individual people's security with individual people's or communities' feeling about their privacy. And in the data age, that is quite a complicated conversation, but it needs to be had. I actually believe that live facial recognition technology, properly overseen, properly thought about, properly circumscribed, is something that our public would probably expect us to be doing. You're sitting in a city that probably has a greater density of CCTV, much loved by the public, than almost any city in the world, and used by the police to protect people, as it's happening all over London at the moment, and also to do investigations if a crime does occur. And live facial recognition, I think, could be very useful.
What's a debate we're not having?
So in so many ways, the bad guys are adopting the newest technologies very fast. Hostile states, of course, adopting new technologies very fast. And in law enforcement in this country, some adoption of new technologies. And of course, we're talking to, for example, our colleagues in New York and other American cities a lot about technologies. But what there isn't enough of is public discourse about what is acceptable and what isn't, and what people would want. Because it needs to be a political decision informed by what the public want, not a decision made by what you might call a securocrat. I've got an interest in safety. Of course, as a citizen, I've got an interest in liberty and privacy as well, absolutely. But the balance needs to be talked about, and there needs to be some leadership around these issues. I'm trying to gear people up a bit in this country, but I think we need to talk about it, and not, unfortunately, in the very binary way that it is often talked about. And because this is nuanced and difficult.
Does that worry you that, there are comparisons to a nanny state, a police state, when we start talking about technology and the use of facial recognition, and people throw up other countries as examples?
Worry's the wrong word. I think it's important that we have always, in a place like this, at the back of our minds, a proper fear of what might be described a police state. Nobody in this city wants to live or work or visit a place in which, data is used to control the citizen, any more than we want to, you're visiting or living in a city right now that still has a primarily unarmed police service that prides itself on policing by consent and upholding people's human rights. So in all their forms. So we absolutely don't want to sort of go by mistake or without thinking about it down a road which actually intrudes in a way that seems like people are being, watched in a way they don't want to be watched, or controlled in a way that's inappropriate in the law or ethically. Finding that balance is quite hard in the modern world. I'm sure this is something you're all wrestling with in a way, because people have different, with the disruption of new technologies, people have quite different views about their privacy and who ought to be able to intrude in what way. And it's quite hard getting the consensus. But I think if, to cut to your question again, sorry, if a terrorist was walking down the street out here, most of the public in London would have thought that probably we were always using a technology that ought to be able to get that person stopped. And if that included live facial recognition, they probably think for the most serious crimes it ought to be being used. We're miles from that, by the way, but unfortunately when you watch the Bourne Supremacy or Bond or any of those things, it's full of it. And we can't just put our heads in the sand. We risk, on the one hand, being really, really, really left behind, or on the other hand, intruding in a way that subsequently results in a great public inquiry and loss of confidence in their police service, which is the most fundamental thing in this country. People need to trust their police and believe they are people of integrity.
And you've been working on that to quite an extent when it comes to recruitment and all of these other issues. The question here is knife crime comes up if you live in London, protests, domestic terrorism. You talked about foreign-influenced cybercrime, organized crime. When we head into Brexit, you've also been pretty vocal about how we may be on the back foot. So when you combine technology, Brexit potential down the road, how do you see the next couple of months in your leadership playing out when you look at how you have to tackle all of the issues that you're facing as a Met Commissioner?
A couple of months.
Well, we're hoping.
She gives me a couple of months. That's good. I'm hoping to carry on for a few more years, but not...
No, a couple of months till Brexit, or till we decide what we're doing with it.
So specifically about that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we are the Metropolitan Police. We are Scotland Yard. We're a world brand. We're proud of what we do, and we're very well known on the streets of London. And we need to maintain a sense amongst our citizens and our visitors that this is a place where people know what they're doing. They're getting on with their job. They're present. They're out there. They're supporting and protecting people. We're preventing crime when we can and investigating it well when we can't. And actually, the B word doesn't affect that very much at all. That's just what we need to be doing. We are working really closely with the government. We're working really closely with other colleagues in European states of similar roles to mine to make sure that whatever the framework afterwards, we can make the most of it. But absolutely, it is the case that if we were to come out without any sort of deal, then there will be an awful lot of work to do to be able to replicate the current systems that we have access to, for example, automatically, or the European arrest warrant, which is very powerful. Replacing that, for example, by extradition is slower, more expensive, more difficult. You know, we will have a steep mountain to climb. But I don't want people to think that in saying that, I'm saying, you know, it's a very gloomy picture, or that, you know, London is hugely at risk if. It is simply that there'll have to be a lot more investment, and we'll have to work really hard at it.
Let's get another question from the room. Can we get a mic handler? Yeah, there you go. Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Living in Johannesburg, and I work across Africa, where policing is quite immature.
Could you introduce yourself?
Sorry, Shola David Bora. I work for Standard Bank, and I work across sub-Saharan Africa. I live in Johannesburg, and policing is quite immature, and often there is excessive use of force. Now, throughout your career, you must have seen the Metropolitan Police mature. Do you have any advice or any lessons learned in terms of reforming the police and building capacity? Thank you.
Yeah. I've seen it change hugely here in 36 years, as you say. I don't know how much the parallels are there, but I would say it's very, very important that, as far as possible, you recruit and develop good people of good values who are broadly, if possible, incorruptible, and you can protect them from corruption. Secondly, it's incredibly important that the outside world looks in and comes in to policing as much as possible. So we are highly accountable, we're highly transparent, and we have people looking at our work, our tactics, our strategies, our policies, our practice all day long, and reflecting back to us, but also talking to the public about whether that's good or bad or indifferent. We've increased that transparency by I haven't got one on, but all my frontline officers have body-worn cameras and have had for about 3 years, which they love, 2 years, because they say it protects them from complaints, it gives them good evidence. So increasing accountability, increasing good governance, and increasing, in my view, transparency raises standards. It's tough, but it's very, very important. And increasing diversity is just fundamental to being a police service that people will have trust in. A police service that's going to be effective in the modern world must be very, very diverse in all its forms, in my view, which is why we've been going on and on about 100 years of women, and we already probably have more women in more ranks, more roles, at more levels than any other police service, I think. But we want many more, but it's not just that sort of diversity, of course, because, you know, here you are in the most diverse city on the planet, and we have to have the confidence of the public in all our most diverse communities that there are. People have to feel this is their police, not an invading force. This is their police that they can trust and that they will work with, and that's a constant work in progress.
And that seems to be reflecting in this recruitment drive that you finally are able to do at the Met Police.
Yeah.
Cressida, I know you have to head to Buckingham Palace, but thank you for taking the time. She gets to go to a state dinner,
I'm
but
not
we
going
get to do
straight there,
this.
but thank
Well,
you.
almost
Got to do a
straight
bit of
there.
work on the way, actually.
Well, we have a little work to do here as well.
Thank
but
you very much.
thank
All the
you
very
again.
best to all of you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.